I'd like to point out what you're attempting has never worked. So
Yes,
at least
I jumped across that beam almost every single time, except for the random times that it decides to just drop me straight down to the floor.
I
have.
it.
We
haven't even gotten to the actual point. This is all the setup, by the way. We actually still haven't even. I was going to land home with a. This is all leading to what I was actually going to bring up. So
I told you be prepared for hitting this.
I told you. Excuse me. I was the one who said that to you.
No, you said acted like you had no topics.
No, I said
tonight.
Get your thinking cap because there's.
Oh, I was thinking you were meaning because I don't.
No, I was saying there's plenty to discuss. I've been sitting on all this for like weeks at this point.
So here's my dilemma: so what I was meaning by the latter, meaning your previous statement, was that by comparison to manipulation, I am certainly one who would apply the knowledge that I have of your would-be reactions to buttonhole you into a particular...
But that's just chess, basically.
Okay, sure. So that's sure.
What am I... I was standing on air. How was that even working? Because that's not manipulation. That's just knowing. That's just the know thy enemy kind of thing, where it's like I know what you're going to do, so I can plan around you.
But I think
and then I'll reveal the fact that I've basically run circles around you.
The reason
but that's
why
not the
I feel
same
guilty
thing.
about it sometimes is because
other people aren't aware of it.
It's not because other people aren't aware of it, but because I recognize how.
But that's like feeling bad for your chess opponent because you predicted his next move.
No, but in chess, two people are willingly playing the game.
I suppose you're arguing that not everyone... Yeah, but that's their fault for not viewing life as chess. I'm playing chess against people thinking they're playing checkers.
I feel bad because oftentimes I see things in people that they don't see in themselves and sometimes argue against me at times. Like, I've had people straight up be like, you're wrong about that. And I'm like, okay. But then they'll be
see?
Come, see.
How did you...
I have said to you, I've done it many times in that exact manner.
No, because that time you didn't jump into the nether.
I did. I did that exact same thing.
I don't buy it.
My point is... Okay, hi. Apparently my point is that I'm being... Okay. He's just ripping me a new one.
Well...
He was ready for that. So, oftentimes people don't recognize... I'll say it even strongly than they don't recognize it. They see my emotional attunement as a weakness. And I go, oh, you're about to have a bad time.
Well, I've never... Okay, maybe this is because I'm not... I've never experienced that because maybe it's because I've known you long enough that I know... I've never made that mistake, I suppose.
That is very true of you.
I suppose that's why that doesn't surprise me. I'm just like, well, no.
You're a better analyst than most people are.
Well, and that's what I would say is, I would say I might even almost understand what you're saying on a psychological level, where it's like I can certainly, in an argument especially, there's ways you can just go, I'm not going to get through to you, so I may as well just tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
But that's not because I'm emotionally attuned. It's just going logically, I can see the various errors you're making and that you don't care to resolve them. So I'm like, okay, so clearly this is not a logical discussion, at which point I may as well stop it.
But see, I do that on an emotional level where I go, if I can't convince you that this is who you are...
So you did a double jump from like here to here to here.
There.
That's better because this cage acts as a sort of stop to prevent you from... Well, that's what I need to... That was a devil! I thought it was one floor beneath that.
You just defeated your own purpose.
I thought that the elevator was only one drop beneath that. I didn't realize it was two. Well, at least I know how to do that and not die on that stupid spot.
So, all that to say, the reason why I get concerned that I do think that Tommy represents a fair bit of my ego is that...
But see, Tommy, that's chess. I don't know that there's any guilt to be had in playing chess.
The reason is because, and that's where Arthur comes in, is because I do wear it still. I do carry it on an emotional level. When I do that to people, do I Do I?
But
think,
do what?
Do I like?
This is what I'm trying
when
to.
When I use
because just to say I know you well enough to know what you're going to do, and I just basically said
when I manipulate that to my own ends, or when I
don't think that's manipulation. Maybe this is because you've got more of a conscience than I do.
So when
I don't view that as being manipulative, because to me, manipulation requires a form of deception,
which is not what I'm thinking.
Because to manipulate in the physical sense of like I've stacked the deck so that things favor me. That's not the same as like I've subverted your own sense of self to get you to do what I want.
No, see, I don't see it as a dishonest question. My point is, if I have bent something I know about you to serve my own ends, that's manipulation in my opinion.
I wouldn't agree, because that's just observation on my end.
Okay, fair.
To say I know I can see the way you do things, so I'll rely on them to plan my. I mean, that's Sun Tzu. I mean, maybe is that part of the problem? Is Sun Tzu not someone I should admire? Well, someone was prepared for you. I wouldn't waste our... Well, then again, maybe it's not a waste on the big welding bros, because they're tough to kill. So maybe the exploding revolver is the right way to go.
So if I... The conscience of Arthur, side of me...
So you just feel bad for having foresight?
I feel bad for people that don't.
Well, I can understand that on a pity level, but I don't have to feel guilty that they're just dumb.
It's not a guilt thing. It's as much as it is more of like a...
It's like, if you're not self-aware, then it's not my fault that you don't know how to approach your own issues. It's like, if I can see more about you than you can of yourself because you just won't look.
This is where Silko's argument comes in my opinion.
Which argument?
When someone... Justification. When someone that I've interacted with, and I can actually use this in a broad sense, in that we've both had interactions with this person, you'll be able to infer.
Okay, you'll be able to.
You'll be able to infer without me having to go any further. But when I'm interacting with somebody who has an arrogance and a pride to say they know me when they really don't, I feel less bad about that, because I'm like, you're about to be burned and you don't even realize that I know more about you than you think I do. But I think where my empathy comes in, or my kind of sympathy for people, or pity, if you want to call it that.
I'll call it pity, because I feel that, where I just go, if you even took a look at yourself, you'd see a whole lot of things.
The things where my pity comes in is where people are actually not ignorant, but like, see, not even, they are juvenile maybe in their, man, I'm looking for a word.
People
that's just
who
not
think
coming
they're
to
better
me.
than they are.
No. That's still an arrogance thing, and I argue
no, I mean
that
morally. Because some people
aren't. Me, that was weird.
Well, because again, we've got boingo knees. You need to be careful, because you can jump high enough now to land hurting yourself. Because I don't mean that in the sense of like I'm superior to, but there are people who are so unaware of their shadow selves that they view that they are the greatest, they are the most at risk of it. And I think that's what I mean when they think they're better than they are. I think that they think of themselves as more harmless than they are. Because that's what I think of when I think juvenile.
No,
people who are naive and they think like, oh, the world's not that bad a place, and I'm just like, well, okay, you can think that, and then you're just gonna get yourself hurt, and it's gonna be sad. But again, that's more of a pity sense than of guilt.
It's people that are there we go, that's the word I was looking for.
Guilt?
There are some people that are arrogant, or they act like they are, they're less aware. Those types of things, I'm like, okay, I can argue that the people that are less aware of their own shadow, or they're arrogant, or whatever else, that's on you. Sucks to be you. Like, you aren't playing chess very well, whatever.
But see, everything's on everyone.
Innocence, when people are so naivete really makes me feel bad sometimes for people. I'm like,
but that's not why. Again, that's not guilt, because I can agree with that. You're just going, you're gonna get yourself hurt because you're just blind.
Yeah,
but I don't feel bad about being the one to tell you that.
It's a bit like,
I mean, I can understand if you were to say, oh, you're naive and therefore I'm going to be the one that hurts you. That's probably a thing to be a problem. But not unless you're about to confess to that, I don't think I quite get what you're...
No, I don't feel... All I'm saying is... Ooh.
All I'm saying is, ooh.
It's difficult to admit that as caring as I come off.
But see, this is where I think you have higher agreeableness than you think, because the fact that you would feel bad about that is a sign of like
the sentiment that I appear to be caring oftentimes when really there are times I am just serving my own ends. And that's a really, really harsh statement about myself. In the sense that you're saying people sometimes think I'm more friendly than I am simply because I'm being friendly to ease this conversation. Right.
Because I do that, but I don't feel bad about it. Because I just go, should I feel bad about that? Just go, and you think I'm awfully chummy. It's like, I'm only talking to you because you're talking to me.
I think that where I start to feel bad is when people then mistaken or misinterpret that, and then like there are people that go, oh my gosh, he's like, Spencer's like my best friend, and I go, sure.
Well, okay, it happened to me. Well.
And I don't say that to make it feel like I'm not friends with anybody.
So this went from, because the way you were just setting this up is you were trying to. It sounded as though you're going to be like, I'm secretly a master narcissist manipulator, and then it turns out you just feel bad for people who aren't self-aware. Because that I can agree.
I feel bad for people that aren't self-aware because somebody who, well, it's Jordan Peterson. It's that whole picture you sent me the other day where people that are not aware of their own.
Well, people,
shadow integration, stuff like that, are always going to be at the mercy of men who are.
Yeah, but that's where I go. That's not. Why should I feel bad about that? Because that was, again, their choice.
It is their choice.
Just because you didn't know it was your choice doesn't mean it wasn't.
Wow.
And that's where I go, I don't have to feel. It's like you might think it wasn't my choice, this all just happened. And I went, no, you let it happen. Therefore, once again, it was your choice. And therefore, I don't have to feel bad because it was your choice. Again, I can understand the guilt of saying, like, I used that to put myself in a better position with you. It's like I knew that I used your lack of self-awareness to get you to serve my desire. That I can see as being a potentially guilt. What's the word? Guilt causing? I don't know. Troubling thing. But I don't. And that's where I say, if I had a keener sense of people's, the ability to emotionally connect with people, I probably would be a little bit more tempted to do that. And I think it's the fact that I'm not that sort of
maybe
where I go, I can't get away with it.
Maybe my dilemma is that people don't see it. Like if I were to, there are genuinely people that I know.
You seem to have that issue just generally, though, that you just, when people are the architects of their own bad circumstance, you just tend to feel bad about it.
No. I'll clarify. I know people that on an intimate level, if I communicated to, like, I feel like I can communicate with you very openly, but there are people that, having communicated that to you, they would genuinely look at me and go, no, that's not true of you. It's like, okay, you can think that, but like they would genuinely say to me, no, you actually are this caring person that doesn't. And I'm like, okay, that's true, but.
Well, I would say that the extent that it is, because simply the fact that it is a nurture rather than nature doesn't change the fact that it's still you.
It is.
Because again, I take the Wattsian perspective that regardless of I'm of the opinion that it's like there is nothing behind that. What you choose to do is all that you are.
Agreed.
So the idea that you can deceive others, you can't deceive yourself. I mean, you can deceive yourself, yes, but you can only deceive yourself by believing the game.
My point is, there are some people that would not think I was capable of using knowledge of people's emotions to my own ends.
Well, but that just would make them naive.
I agree. But that hurts to say because that makes me feel like some sort of...
Well, again, it's not your responsibility that other people are naive.
Psychopath that manipulates others.
See, but that's what I think points to your having a higher real agreeableness than you think, because a psychopath wouldn't care.
Well, that's certainly true.
So it's like, I feel bad that what? My own exploding bullets killed me? Or was he just also shooting me at that time?
I don't have any idea. That seemed a little weird.
So I don't know that. Well, I think you're not as bad off as you made it sound. Because to feel bad that other people are not self-aware
but it doesn't change the fact that I do it. Like, I don't feel like Tommy doesn't feel bad about the things he does at times, but
I think a lot of the times he doesn't.
Only because he's justified it in his own mind.
No, Silco's justified in his own mind. I don't think Thomas requires justification. What does he say several times throughout the show? We do it because we can. That is his justification. He's like, we're going to do this because I can do it, and the day I can't do it will be the day I stop trying.
But I mean,
he said those very words, so it's like there is no justification other than I want to.
Which is, I think that's the part that scares me because I can totally see that in like, I'm not specifically using the knowledge of others for their benefit always. I suppose I will say it that way.
And you feel that you have to?
Not that I have
That's
to,
the devil.
but that
because unless you're using
oftentimes
them,
people
to say I'm not
assume that I am.
Well, again,
maybe that's
you never interrupt
way.
your enemy when he's making a mistake.
Well,
I'm just full of these Sun Tzu quotes.
We're apparently.
I mean, I suppose the idea that other people are your enemy is a perception you might not take, but.
Oh,
so that does hurt you.
How about I just give away my position?
We've answered the question. Your own exploding bullets do in fact hurt you. So does that grenade you're sitting on. It took us an hour and we ain't got nowhere.
Sorry.
We probably are already on the second episode. We just didn't know it.
Well,
because we haven't hit the thrust of the question.
We're going to have to figure out a place to break that. So
we'll break somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to start another one now. I've done that before. I sometimes will interrupt in the middle just because it's fairly seamless anyways. At least in the playback. Those who have to wait week to week, I guess, will have to wait week to week. But most of the people who will ever see this probably will see it not live. So
go ahead into the.
So the answer to your question is essentially you're arguing that Tommy is both then for you.
Yes.
Because
I think the characters are well enough developed that they do have their id and ego.
I still think you're projecting a shadow. Because you're, again, saying, I could do that. You keep talking about it as though it's like, I could see myself doing that.
No, I do it. That's the part that hurts to admit.
Yeah, but it doesn't hurt Tommy to admit it. Therefore, I don't see why you're seeing the connection.
Well, again, I say it's a combination of Arthur and Tommy. Because Arthur certainly bears the weight of the choice.
But Arthur bears the weight of choosing to kill innocent people. We're talking about radically different actions. You feel the weight of like using other people's lack of self-awareness, perhaps to put yourself in a decent position. And I mean,
a decent position, a better position.
But I mean, I don't. That you've never conned. I don't think you've ever conned somebody out of their life savings or something like that. Unless you're holding out on me.
No.
Where's the money? So it's like just to say, this person's like this, so I let that stack the deck. I don't know that that's inherently the same as like, yeah, I've had to kill innocent people for my job, and I don't like it, but I still do it. I mean, that's a very different level of questioning. He's got weird bird legs. I just noticed that. I'm taking those. Those are probably the ankles I need. So that's why I still can't help but feel that there is an element of shadow that you're calling persona or whatever the term we haven't decided on yet.
All I'm wanting you to define that because here's my
define what.
What I'm claiming is that I can see elements. I can certainly see. Did you just hide that behind it?
No, I hooked the body at him. I was trying to drop it, and I just hooked it at his friend.
It looked like you quickly hit it behind the box.
Well, I mean, I think I hit it behind the guy who just walked in because I don't think he saw me do it.
I see much of Tommy's working everything and everybody for his own ends.
Well, so it's the Jacob thing. I mean, I don't know that that's...
To myself. And that's not something I say I could do that. That is something I do. I struggle to not to do because it is a part of who I am. But
you are not a gang boss, so clearly you're not having that much of a struggle. Like, not unless that's on your table and I'm just insulting your timeliness. Okay, buddy! How many freaking times? I can shoot 2 of the big heavy-duty power armor-wearing guys with these. It takes 2 shots to bring them down. It took 4, and you're not even wearing armor.
Your timeliness, meaning just
like, why aren't you a gang boss yet? Because unless that's in your cards, it's like, I don't think... Again, I think you're attributing to yourself more negative things than you have actually done.
It's not...
Because I think there's an argument of like, okay, yeah, I will sometimes use this fact that I have a better understanding of people's psychology than perhaps they do to stack the deck. That's not the same as saying, yes, and I used it to take over their, betting organization to become the kingpin of London. Like, those are substantively different degrees. Maybe you could argue it's a matter of degree rather than of substance.
Right.
But I don't know that... I still think degree matters.
Yes, but I mean... Your argument seems to be falling apart in that Silco, to that same level... You're certainly not.
Yeah, because nothing's happened to
the
me
degree
yet.
of. So you're just again timeliness.
No, that's why I would say it's a matter of shadow than of ego. I don't view myself as this revolutionary gonna change the world, but I certainly view myself as capable of doing the things that he does. Not in a capable, not in that makes it sound like I could be the king. I simply mean of capable of the action. Where you're going, I could justify those sorts of actions given the right context.
Well, and I'm saying the same
revolution
thing.
Is not something I would shy away from if it came to that.
Right.
Where some people would be like, no, we must maintain peace, and I'm like...
And I'm saying becoming a gang boss isn't certainly something I would shy away from if it came to that.
Yes, but that's a shadow thing. That's not an ego thing. Ego is, who are you at this very moment? Because that's all that there is. There is no, I could be this. That's shadow.
I'm being pushed to that level.
Well, we may also be being pushed to revolution. Who knows how things will turn out in the coming years.
Well, I'm saying on a more... myopic personal level, I'm getting to that point.
Gang boss point or retaliation against someone who's been a jerk to you point?
No.
Because there's a difference between
nothing that petty. I'm just saying.
Now you're just speaking enigmatically.
The thought has recently crossed my mind. Man,
I could sell
heroin.
I
can't. No, I can't. Given my family's historical roots,
I don't think they'd let you back in at this point.
No,
they don't trust you
that's
enough.
True. However, the thought has definitely crossed my mind to at least investigate.
But see, that's not the same. That isn't the same. To say I'm curious about learning about this is not the same as saying...
No, it's not just learning about it. I'm like...
Well, have you talked to someone? Has Vinny reached out? Or would it be Ernst or whatever? I don't know what the Germans are called. Heinrich saying, we'd love to have you back, because I think he just wants the money.
Yeah, that's exactly. I wish I had it.
If I had it, I'd share some with him.
No, if I had it, I'd use it to my own ends.
These are all useless! Except for this, maybe, and I can't have it. Stun gun ammo and a laser rifle. I don't have these! I don't even know what this is. It's some kind of weapon upgrade, but it's not one I probably need. Cooling system.
I'm just saying, at the place I'm currently at...
But I think, again, to think a thing is not the same as to do it. So again, I think to say, I could be if the circumstances... That's basically the same as saying, if the circumstances were right, I could do this. It's like, well, okay. But that's not the same thing as saying, I am currently doing this. Unless you're just in a roundabout way trying to get to that. Has Ernst reached out to you?
No, but I certainly
but I reached out to him.
I certainly have people like... No.
I still probably can't have this. How much I don't drop? I guess I can just...
I suppose I will turn the table slightly and ask you, do you feel like are you saying that you feel like Silco just represents your shadow, or do you think that there's a degree of ego to...
Well, the problem is the very fact that I recognize it means some part of it must have become an ego thing. But I think he was probably a catalyst in that. I genuinely at first was like, I should probably examine a bit of why I'm so intrigued by this guy because it was at first something I'm like, I shouldn't, logically speaking, I should not resonate as much with this character as I do, if given the fact that things are so, I am not in apparently the same circumstance. I mean, Jordan Peterson has said that we're going, the reason anti-heroes and the sort of whole sympathetic villain thing is a thing is because oftentimes that is the way your subconscious sort of gets your attention, is because he's saying basically that's a part of your shadow self that is asking to be integrated. And that was where I had to go, okay, clearly there's something about this I need to look into. And so I would argue an element of it has become somewhat conscious by reflection, because again, you can never truly know your subconscious because it's definitionally unknown. But as you begin to integrate it, you become more known, and then I'm not sure what you'd call it at that point. You'd have to, it's some sort of neo-consciousness or something. What was the specific nature of the question? Because obviously I think were I in that circumstance, I can see that I would, because were I in that circumstance, it would no longer be the shadow, it would become who I am, and thus then, of course, it would be conscious.
But see, that seems semantic, because I'm saying the same thing, and you're feeling you're
no, because I am not that yet, and I'm still maintaining that I am not and won't be until the circumstances arise, which they very well may never arise. Perhaps by the fact that I'm conscious of it, it may never arise because I might be able to thwart against it, which is the whole point of knowing it. The whole reason to know what you could do is to hopefully not do it.
So you're saying you are, but because you are aware of it, you aren't. I suppose in a pithy sense.
That's
a very woo way of.
But that's arguably the whole. Again, I would say that's arguably the whole point. Unless we had the whole discussion. Unless you know the circumstances that could lead you to shoot someone in the head, you have you have no ability to stop it from happening.
Right.
Only when you know what could cause it are you able to prevent against it.
And I'm saying
But that doesn't make it a part of your ego.
I'm wrestling with that currently. Yes.
Well, okay, but that's not. Again, I don't think that's the same as saying.
That's like it's not just a theory. I suppose I'll say it.
Well, sure, that I can understand.
Like in that sense, I definitely.
But I don't think shadow is ever a theory.
No, I'm saying in that sense, I definitely could say that it's ego in that it's not just some theoretical. Like I could see me doing that. That is what I will do, unless I allow for.
But that's shadow again. I think it's
still. I don't understand
it's only
how
shadow
you're mincing that because you're.
Well, it's a difficult. I honestly don't. I don't know how you would. It's a difficult concept because the subconscious is obviously by definition unknowable.
Yes, but
yet clearly there's an element
of ego to yours, but then not to.
No, I'm not applying it to mine. I don't consider Silco to be an ego character.
Okay, now I'm confused because I thought you said you did.
No, again, I think there is a bit of gray area when the fact that I have reflected on it means to some extent it must be becoming that, but again, not on a. When the shadow becomes conscious, the question is, I don't know what it becomes at that point. Does Jung even have a term for it? Because arguably the shadow, or perhaps is the shadow the conscious part of the subconscious? I honestly have not read enough of these people to know.
I think shadow integration is certainly the conscious part of subconscious because to be aware of it therefore makes it conscious.
Well, exactly, and thus it's no longer the shadow if we're sticking to this rigid terminology. And that's where I go, does it become the ego? Well, I don't exactly know because I still don't view myself as a Silco character because I'm not in his shoes.
Sure.
To say that I could be in his shoes doesn't mean that I am. Again, this is coming down to the Watts thing. I am what I am right now and only that. So the fact that I could be that if the circumstances arose does not mean I am that now.
In other words, because I haven't enacted anything that Tommy would have therefore done, even if I could have, shadow. Or even if I might want to. I see what you mean.
That's how I'm differentiating it, is because shadow, I would argue. Again, I don't know what Freud's definition of the id was, but I feel like the way Jung describes the shadow is much more of a conscious id, which is, of course, impossible. But
yeah,
it is the beginning to understand your subconscious self. And thus, what does it become at that point? Because it's sort of pseudo-conscious. I don't know if these guys ever created terms for these things. Okay, well, grenades that blow through barricades. So that's why I'm drawing the distinction, is because unless you are in those shoes, I don't know that you can say that's who you are, even if you feel as though you could fill those shoes if they came to you.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, if Civil War breaks out, there's a moderate chance that I could be a so-called character. But that isn't going to happen, or it isn't happening, and it's not exactly imminent.
And again,
I don't view myself that way.
If government was as corrupt as it's becoming, I may start to consider.
May run for parliament.
Exactly. I in fact made the comment to because
as you go, you have to become the sheriff.
So here's where we're gonna actually get rubber to road here, and then we're gonna get into the meat of the conversation, which is what you were wanting to get to.
Is this not the meat of the conversation? Because I feel like
you seem to suggest we were scraping the butter on the surface.
No, I just think that it's going to take a slightly different direction than this when I get to my point, because I view these as separate elements. I guess we'll ultimately get down to the fact that, to me, Arcane contains a shadow character and an ego character, and they are distinct.
Interesting.
Whereas you don't. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure Piki had one that was both, or if he maybe just didn't have one.
They're encapsulated in the same character for me, and that's the weird distinction.
See, but that's actually why what I view less. So I wouldn't bother with the save now that we know that there's nothing worthwhile in it.
What do you mean?
The thing I was doing when I got with cracking the safe and hacking stuff, that wasn't worthwhile because it was a bunch of things we can't use. I would almost argue, though, because the fact that all of them have to be contained within one character, that none of them get full characterization.
Hey, hi, okay.
Well, I'd maybe alter your strategy when that happens.
I've been able to pop that guy repeatedly
yes, but when Big Man comes along, you must hit it. Because if you can fully,
this
I would
recently
say
came up, and this will again rubber to road. I made the comment to my wife the other day because she was watching this
heroin.
No, she was watching this docuseries on 20s and 30s mob.
Well, there you go.
And I was sitting there, and at one point they were talking about essentially the idea that early mob used the construction business in various parts of downtown and kind of the core city areas for racketeering. And I was like, what
they
defines
use just about everything?
Yes, I said, but I said, what defines racketeering versus just good business? I mean, basically,
I believe racketeering means creating the market that you are also supplying. Like war profiteering is the most obvious version of that. It's like stoking war so that you can sell.
Right,
that's not good business. That's not good business, because good business is identifying a hole in the market that you can then fill.
But creating it's just
racketeering
smarter.
is creating the hole that you then fill.
Well,
which is dubious, and I don't know what the actual laws are, because I think they are naturally dubious because it's hard to prove.
But my point is, then I actually made the case. I said, so the bottom line is politicians are racketeers; they just are legally able to be.
Oh no, that's literally Aesop 6000 BC said something. Literally, basically the same thing. I love the quote, actually. It says, we hang petty criminals and elect the great ones to public office.
They're
just going...
Well, that's my point. It's literally Tommy Shelby. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that doesn't make what... Because arguably the moral problem with racketeering isn't making the money, it's causing the problem.
But it depends on how you cause the problem.
Well, no. If you're instigating war in a country simply to be able to sell arms to them...
I'm talking about basic racketeering.
But that's racketeering. I'm saying it's the hole that you're creating is often created by non-legal means.
Sure.
That's what makes it illegal.
That's a gray area, in my opinion, if no one's getting hurt.
But they usually are, though, because that's the nature of it. Otherwise, it would... Like, a hostile takeover is an unpleasant thing, but it is nonetheless fully legal. It becomes... Like, if you... I probably almost won't be able to give this example, because up until recently, this was fictional. But... Like, the whole concept of the V for Vendetta, we created a disease so that we could sell the cure. That's profiteering.
That's profiteering. And it's racketeering, 100%.
Exactly, but the creating of the disease is the immoral part, not just selling the...
Agreed, but the point is, people that are good at it get a free pass.
Well, except for the fact that I'm saying that's what makes it immoral. It's not, I capitalized on an opportunity. Because you could be, if you're, I mean, this is the state defense contractors are already, and people are like, people who obviously profit off of war, there's a moral question where it's like, is that, is that a great position to be in? That's a reasonable thing to sort of wonder about. But when you are the person stoking war simply to sell, that becomes a problem. And in the same sense, like if you're just selling medicine,
going back to that particular
because I think all of them are like
whereas
that.
I say if you are benefiting the construction companies who work for you alone when you can get a cut from it, that's technically
that qualifies?
It qualifies as racketeering, and they essentially were rounding a ton of people up and going, but that's just good business practice.
Well, is it not the kind of
arm twisting?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That's what makes it the problem.
But I'm like, but that's sorry.
That's the whole nice business. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Right. That is what the immoral part of it, because that's essentially saying it's one thing to be a harsh negotiator. It's another thing to make people sign contracts with a gun to their head. That's what racketeering.
A little strong.
No, because that's essentially what the mob was doing. They didn't actually have the gun on them, but there was the acknowledgement that if you don't sign this, we will make a problem.
No, what they were saying is you are already having, like, for instance, if there was
people were signing these things because they went, well, I can get a cut with him. We'll have a thing. They also knew, if I don't, they'll come around with a baseball bat.
Agreed. But
so it's not like, well, as long as we're both benefiting, the mob would have absolutely gone and kneecapped people who didn't play.
Agreed.
That's what makes racketeering wrong.
But so does the union and all kinds
This is why I'm not in favor of unions. I mean, it's also why I'm not in favor of government.
Well, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but this is what this is what aboutism, though, because to simply say that
to call it dubious if it's not.
Well, but something can be morally dubious despite other people doing it.
Sure,
simply the fact that the government does it.
The very people that are wanting to identify it as a problem.
You hurt yourself again
because I keep using
shooting the concrete for no reason.
I keep using the wrong.
That should kill him. He is not wearing armor, other than the welding mask.
The wrong trigger.
My point, if you're just going to say, well, because the government's corrupt, I should be able to break the law too, and it's like, well,
sorry, that to me,
if we lived in the Wild West, I might have slightly more sympathy. But I think the fact of the matter is, I'm not even going to necessarily argue on the moral front. It's more of a matter of you're going to get arrested, and I'm not going to bail you. It's like simply because other people are being criminals doesn't mean you should be a criminal without consequence.
I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be without consequence. I'm just saying if you're good enough at it, you should be able to get away with it. If you can get away with it,
we described this with the Yakuza comparison in Japan, where it's going, yeah, the Yakuza's actually lost a lot of power in Japan, and now violent small gangs are rising. Because it turned out the Yakuza kept those people in check. So it's a little bit of agreed to like, someone had to be the ones to break the law, because someone's always going to break the law. You'd at least like the lawbreakers to have some sense of respect and class.
That's the whole quote from Peaky Blinders.
I don't disagree.
You're bad men, but you are bad men.
Yeah, I don't fully disagree with that, but I also don't think that there's this... I don't fully buy into your idea of like... It seems as though you're attempting to moralize it in the way of like, well, then there shouldn't be consequences for being bad.
I'm not suggesting there shouldn't be consequences. What I'm saying is, one can hardly support the
you can't be a busybody
abolishment or the kind of finger wagging at people that are racketeering when our own government plays by the same rules. It's like, no.
Well, I mean, arguably the only people who can do the finger wagging are those not engaged in it at all. Because to simply say, well, the government does it, therefore I should do it. It's like
that's the ones who do the finger wagging is the problem.
Well, okay, I fully agree that the government has no right in that sense. I'm saying the average citizenry could say, hey, we'd like to actually have both of you stop. Like, that's the ultimate solution would be, hey, how about the government and the criminals stop being scum? But we can't get what we want.
Well, because we don't live in a society that, again...
this is going wrong.
To quote Peterson's, whole principle of the whole reason that,
what's with the
communism and socialism don't work is because there is no actual moral high ground for people that eventually maintain that level of power. It's like, you are not going to be some perfect representation of what ought to be. You will eventually be corrupted by What is it? Absolute power.
Well,
Absolutely.
wasn't it Al Capone who said something like, if the mafia was in charge of the government, there'd be half the corruption and twice the fun? I don't fully agree, but I do think back in like the 50s when the government was actually cracking down on the mob, and the government was at least relatively reliable back then, there is an element of like, yes, everyone in the modern day, I probably don't know that you'd notice the difference if the mafia was in charge, but I think in the 60s there was enough government good faith in the government that's like, okay, we wouldn't prefer that at this point. Because the thing about that is, the reason the mafia couldn't twist everybody's arm is because if they tried, they would eventually get, and they did eventually get, shot down by the government. And that's
which was arguably just a gang war.
Well, no, I don't know that it was back then, because again, I think the government has radically devolved since then. I think, FDR is to blame for a great many things we're still dealing with. So back then, it made sense to say
you are not dead. Are you joking?
Okay. How many times before you actually just accept that this happens? Because I've commented on it many times. Your commenting on it will make it happen. You got to get a bit of empiricism in you. It's not rationalism, it's empiricism. We start with what is, not what should be. So if you're saying, like, I wouldn't necessarily say that I view, them any differently, but I do think that the idea that we should just abandon the standard because no one's following it, I think that just leads to a spiral.
That's true, but the standard certainly irritates me if no one's upholding it.
I fully agree that it's irritating, and I don't engage. I would certainly agree that, like, the concept of the moral high grounding is absurd because no one has it anymore. But that doesn't mean that we ought to just abandon it and go, well, forget about it.
I agree. So get to the point that you were kind of. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to devolve the conversation into something different. I was just.
Well, I still am a little bit thrown by. I think maybe we just have a different perception of what ego means and what I mean by that, and versus what separates the ego from the shadow. And even then, I don't know what the psychological literature says on it either, so I can't provide an answer as to where the line is drawn. But
I just want to know what you're.
Well, perhaps example, I suppose, is the only way to illustrate, because I would say that in Arcane, Silco's definitely the shadow character, but I would argue, and this is no surprise to anyone who's heard us discuss it, that Jinx is far more of the ego character, which is probably even more unflattering depending on who you are. I'll let you ruminate on that. Does that not on its own clarify what I probably am getting at? Because those are certainly not one character, and they're also certainly not similar characters, really. Most people wouldn't say, I think. Because that's what I mean when I say that because Thomas is one character, to say that both elements are contained in him, that's not untrue, obviously, because a good character can be well-rounded. But the fact that, like, I get a character that is 100% a shadow reflection, which means that is all that it is, and therefore every aspect of his characterization is also an aspect. It just is essentially a higher resolution, in my opinion. Because you're essentially splitting the various parts and giving them a full personality of their own, which gives you better magnification as to what makes them tick, therefore
that's fair.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I was getting at.
I don't know that it's quite that obvious in Peaky for me.
Well, that's why I found Arcane to be genuinely a form of a psychological, like,
map
revelation, is him going, okay, this is actually literally showing 2/3 of my psyche fully developed on screen. That was in the back of the head. I've seen the back of your head. That's just a strap. There's no metal there. Show me the back of your head. Look. Oh, well, look at it. His head, the back of his head is exposed. The back of his head is exposed. Get it up. Oh.
You got shot just because you were looking.
Because seriously, the back of his head has just like the weird welding strap, and so shooting him in the back of the head should have killed him.
What was that about empiricism?
Well, I'm annoyed merely because of the fact that what is not metal on the back of his head. So that doesn't seem. So you perhaps get what I'm.
I get your quandary, and I suppose maybe your
Peaky did not have a character. I don't think Thomas was as close of a map on the shadow side of things either, and it had no character that I felt on an ego level was like, I see myself as this person.
I definitely feel that Tommy is far closer on a shadow level. I would say
I can understand that, but the ego part is what throws me.
If anything, I would say,
because that would imply here, I guess perhaps Barbara Walters up in here. If you see yourself as Thomas, why don't I? Because that would then reflect a certain degree of
there's just variance in you and I. I mean, what do you mean?
No, I don't see why don't I see myself in Thomas. I say why don't I see Thomas in you? If you see Thomas in you, because that would therefore imply that even that you're hiding the Thomas element of you from me, and perhaps that's true, or perhaps
that's true. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, but see that I find
to be disingenuous. Again, I say you're not the first person to tell me that.
Because you've never. Who do you act like that around if you're not me? Because you don't seem to act like that around anyone. Because again, I think if it's on a shadow level of like, okay, I certainly could, and I sometimes have those impulses where it's like I think on a House, the reason I liked House is because House is a character I wish sometimes that I could be just like, I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to, no buttering up, I'm just going to say how it is. I don't do that, but I like House because there's times what I think what House says. But that's not the same as saying I am like House. I don't view myself as being House. That's what I say as a shadow thing. It's like, I definitely get where he's coming from, and sometimes I wish I could be like that, but that's still not what I'm like. That's the difference for me. Because there is a difference in what I wish I could do sometimes and what I actually do. Because it is still me making the choice to not do it. Therefore, I must be different from the character that does do it. Because some part of me it's not like I wish I could be like this, but some cosmic force makes me be otherwise. I'm the one choosing not to be that, which means some part of me is deliberately not being this character. I guess that's the part I'm calling the ego, is that which that's which makes me do other than what the shadow does. So unless you're running a criminal empire I don't know about, in which case I want to cut.
That's your first thought.
Well, otherwise I don't know. I was going to say go to the cops, but I don't know that anyone would believe me. Oop. Hey, I think I'm finally getting better at that. How do you define ego then? Because that seems to be the sticking point.
No, the way I perceive ego is who I actually am according to me. But super ego is who I'd like to be. Ego is who I am according to me. It is who I actually am.
Sure.
So you would see me as id, which would make sense at why you would say you don't see me as ego, because that's of course the way I.
But again, does the House comparison? You would say that because I think like House does, and I wish I would act like that, even though I don't, that my ego is House. Because I would say my shadow is House.
No, because you identify that you're not that.
No, I certainly think that, but I don't do that.
Right. You don't do it.
Okay, but again, where's the cocaine then, is the question I'm going to have to ask. Or whatever it was they were smuggling. It wasn't cocaine at the beginning. What did they even start with again?
Opium.
No, that was later, I thought.
Yeah, later it was opium. So, I mean, they started with the guns and the...
Oh, that's what it was, right. Do you agree with my distinction? Are we just reversing our terms?
Yes, no, not maybe. The quandary I'm having is, obviously, the whole frame of Peaky Blinders is that it's a mob context. And so there are certain things that are going to be that are going to be misaligned in that, of course, I'm not an actual mafia
I am also
boss.
not a 16-year-old girl who accidentally killed her family.
Right,
so, I mean,
but I'm just...
there's obviously things we don't... I'm not suggesting that the ego is like, oh, it's actually me. But, I mean, I guess in a sense of self... I guess I am going to have to get to a degree of self-perception, which... Your distinction of the id being the true self and the ego being the perception that may or may not necessarily hold
right
water to anyone but you.
Right.
Well, then I guess the question is, would you... Does my confession bamboozle you as much as yours bamboozles me? Or not bamboozles, a little bit strong. Would you be like, that's odd because I don't see you that way? Or are you...
I certainly could see you more as Silco than I can see you as Jinx.
Well, so then perhaps... So I think maybe we're just on different frameworks then. So is the ego then, perhaps we just find it as the fantasy we indulge about ourselves? So maybe what we're maybe talking about is the super ego. But then again, I don't know that that's right either, because that's aspirational. It's like, I don't wish to be that necessarily. Persona may be the only word then. Yeah. It's the mask we choose, but also the mask we show ourselves, not others. I guess that's why I was opposed to the word persona at the beginning, because it does carry a external idea. Like, I am the thing behind the mask, really, but the mask is what I show to others. Whereas I think persona is actually... The persona is what I believe myself to be, and there are just other ones that I show others. But there is also one I show myself. I guess.
I'm trying to unpack the whole Arthur and Tommy distinction, because I think that therein lies my clarification in maybe the whole shadow versus ego thing, because I certainly would say the shadow is the whole I could and do, when pushed to the extremes, become a calculated son of a gun. But I certainly also have...
But isn't that the argument of the concept of the lion in the cage? That doesn't mean you are the lion. That means the lion...
is a potential. It's the shadow.
Exactly.
So I would agree with that. So that... Let's let that be identified as Tommy. And the reason I would bring Arthur into that equation is because then I certainly would say, on an ego level, I can do horrid things and do horrid things, but then I do have that dilemma of emotional kind of weight that I bear about them, and in that way, that's very much Arthur.
So then that's where I would say that does show a pretty heavy split, because I don't think Thomas ever really shows that side.
And I would say he doesn't.
Again, we talk about the fact
it.
that obviously Silco and Jinx have their relationship because parts of them interact with the parts of the others. That's why I think their relationship is the crux of the show to me, not one of them individually.
Right.
So the argument being that, yes, each would show a case of the other. It's, again, why Thomas and Arthur's relationship is so compelling. But still, I feel that there's enough separation that you obviously would see them as different.
Sure. And so I'm wanting to make sure that I clarify that, to me, ego is a...
If I were to be edgy, I would say ego is the lie you tell yourself. Is that too emo? Maybe. Am I coming too much out of 2005?
Okay.
Because that's, I suppose, I mean, that would be a sort of edgy way of putting the Alan Watts way of saying it, which is basically just that the ego is not necessarily who you really are. It's just it's a thing you fabricate about yourself. So, I mean, to call it a lie, I think is far too strong, because he would argue that it isn't. That makes it a sinister thing. It's not a bad thing, but it's not a.
It's not a
to
inherent truth.
To call it a delusion also feels too strong. But I mean, that is the whole pursuit of the concept of Zen and all those things, is to learn to see through the ego.
Yeah, but that's more about elevating to a level of, it's not just seeing through your delusion makes it seem self-imposed. I would say Alan Watts describes it more as universally a struggle to be,
didn't work that time.
a struggle to be pushed through for everyone. Like, it's a part of nature to have to overcome this construct.
Sure, this is where I would actually get off the Zen bandwagon, is this concept that, like, the ego is what makes you exist, because otherwise you would just be a part of the universe.
A part of the universe, yeah.
And I'm not sure I quite go that far with the Zen concept.
No, I certainly
But
don't.
I suppose when I don't know, when I say things like nothing exists outside the ego, then I suppose that is, I'm on that doorstep.
That's a bit...
The argument...
Is it solipsism? Yeah.
It gets on that. I don't think it's quite to that degree. It is on that spectrum, I suppose. But I think so. The solipsistic argument is, in fact, why Alan Watts discourages the unenlightened from pursuing Western or Eastern philosophy, is because the danger of it is when you hear the statement, "You are the universe," what that is meant to do is bring the universe down to your level. What it often does is bring people up to the universe level, where they think it brings their ego up.
Yeah, but
it doesn't squash the ego and make you realize nothing's behind it. Therefore, all that there is the universe.
Right.
It makes them think, I am the whole of everything, and that is the solipsistic side.
Well, and that's it's also arguably what I feel he argued against. Argued against maybe is too strong. He certainly brought clarification to with the Zazen thing, where it was like to strive after something through a means of, like, what did he say? To get through Zen is a bit problematic because it's rather un-Zen.
Well, it's precisely the way he says it about to kill the ego is the most egotistical thing you could ever do. Because only if you do so in the pursuit, it's a bit of the joke about, the humble brag concept of, I too am extremely humble. It's like that. It's an oxymoron to say it.
Right.
But it's a similar way of saying to pursue enlightenment, to transcend your ego, is in and of itself an egotistical thing to do.
Whereas if you're doing it in an actual Zen concept, it's in the mundane, natural things that you are doing that you will indeed
it's sort
find.
Of it's a bit of a peek behind the curtain sort of thing, and that's what I mean when I say that there's nothing behind the persona. Is not that. I mean, I'm not sure I myself have developed a solid enough understanding to put it into words. But this the kind of idea that everything about you is within your control.
Yes.
And you could just choose to be a radically different person. Like, you could just decide, I'm going to change all of the things I care about, all of the habits I have, and that wouldn't necessarily be easy.
I think you could change your presentation of yourself?
I do believe that is the same thing, is my point. There is nothing other than what you present.
And that's where I
disagree. Because what you present to yourself, the thoughts you think, are presentations to yourself.
Okay, so here's maybe where the dilemma is for you and I. I think people can change what they present. I do not think that you can change the core of who you are to yourself unless there is a degree, unless there's a degree of self delusion, because it's disingenuous.
Or is that not what the concept of transcendence would be in a Zen sense?
It's not transcendence, because transcendence actually suggests that there's an arrival to a place where your actual emotional state and mental state shifts.
Because I don't know that I would agree with that, because the analogy he always gives is it's like going through a door and turning to see there was no door. It's not a place. That's the whole point. It's not a place of arrival. It's you realize that you were already there.
Right. Your perception's changed. The birds. Where did the birds go? They have already flown away. They're gone. They're not.
But that's the point. Is you only exist now. So any concept you have of a previous self is something you're carrying with you now.
Correct.
So you can just toss that. And you could even change it and say, who I am now is not who I was. And you could say, well, who I was doesn't exist. Other than that, I hold them in a perception. So if I stop holding a perception of who I was goes away. And that's a metaphysical question. I mean, I'm not sure that I can wholly endorse it. I don't think it's always wrong. But the idea of like the koan, which I actually felt first.
That was more what I resonated.
The very first koan that it's actually why this book was sort of a degree of like, oh, okay, I've clearly uncovered something, because it was the first koan that I found the answer to. Like without, it was the one when he said the question of, whoa, that came from behind me. The question of, all people have a place of birth. Where is your place of birth?
Right.
The answer being, I ate a bowl of rice this morning and now I am hungry. Because basically what it's saying is the fact that I existed somewhere else previously has no bearing on where I am now. So the only part of it that stays with me is the part of it I remember. And therefore, if I stop perceiving my past self, it does basically disappear because it's gone.
But how can you actually stop?
I don't know that you can. I mean, I don't know that you can do it consciously.
There's a degree of disassociation you have to embrace, because
I suppose, but to call it disassociation with what? Something that doesn't. You can't dissociate from something that doesn't exist.
But you have the memory that you can't. You either ignore it and pretend it's not there, or you.
Well, no. The proper thing in all Zen is to touch the thoughts lightly and let them go. You can acknowledge who I was without holding on to the idea that was me. I'm sounding far more Buddhist than I think I intend to.
We're not Buddhists.
But I'm just saying that's the point, is you go, I can fully acknowledge, like, this is who I was as a child, and this is all the things about me, but I can also say that's not me anymore. And both of these statements are true. If I were to say, because again, I'm not suggesting you could change your past and be like, this is who I always have been. That would require a lie. But to simply say, this is who I am now, I can choose in the next minute to be someone different. I can't deny that in the past I was this person, but I can deny that person no longer exists, and thus I don't have to continue perceiving them. That's, I guess, what I'm getting at. So perhaps...
I just got destroyed. I didn't end up doing what I wanted to do.
So delusion, I suppose you could call that delusion, but I also think there's enough logic behind it to make you think, is it delusion, or is it just an altered frame of reference?
It's an altered frame of reference that you yourself choose.
But does that make it false simply because you chose it?
Doesn't make it false, but it certainly makes it self-imposed.
Again, does that make it false? Because arguably a lot of things are self-imposed.
True, but God... So, to kind of... I'm going to borrow from Judeo-Christian westernized religion by comparison to Eastern philosophy,
what about the essay that I'm going to write sometime that shows that they're not as incompatible as people think?
Well, I mean, Alan Watts would certainly agree, but the concept that Jesus, as being a representation of God in human form, self-restricted himself to being a human, like he was fully human, but that doesn't, there's a degree of, okay, but he was still God incarnate. I mean, it's like,
I fail to see how this
so my point is, it's self-restricted in that he could have at any moment exercised his ability of being God, and did, in fact, in some senses, but he was also fully human. But some people go, well, that's disingenuous, because how can you be fully human while also having the full ability to be God at the same time? And I think that's the same concept that I'm struggling with when it comes to saying your former self isn't who you are at all, and that it doesn't exist, because I go, but your former self still exists within your own memory and recollection.
But you don't have to view that as you.
You don't have to view it, but it's still there.
No, you don't have to view it as you, because your recollection... I'm not going to say that you can sit and say, I'm choosing to forget. You can't choose to forget something, but forgetting seems to happen just randomly. But the point I'm saying is, again, it's the touching the thoughts lightly kind of concept where you don't have to ignore them, nor do you have to embrace them. You can just let them be.
You don't have to embrace them. The latter part.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like you think you can fully say, yeah, I used to be that, but I'm not.
Right.
Because what I am now is what I am.
I
ate a bowl of rice.
That
was the bowl of
100%.
rice. Now I'm hungry.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that you can.
You never had a bowl of rice.
No.
Right.
But again, what does it matter? If I did, if I didn't, it doesn't matter. The point is,
I totally agree with. What does it matter is a more apt description.
And that's why I'm saying you can radically change who you are, and you can then be that way.
100%.
And I don't think it's delusion, unless you attempt to.
I wasn't suggesting that part was delusion. What I'm saying is to deny that the other never existed.
It becomes delusion when you attempt to force it in both forward and back in time.
Right, exactly.
Because arguably, it's also equally a delusion to say it was you.
Right.
I mean, let's just be fair. So it's also a delusion to say it will be you.
Right.
You only exist now.
Currently, correct.
And so all forward and backwards thinking is delusion.
Right.
So all I'm saying is you have the power to control that.
Correct. That much I totally agree with. Which is why I actually thought there were also a lot of parallels to Stoicism.
That's another essay.
That's my second essay.
I think Stoicism is essentially the Western philosophers' reaching of the same
rendition.
point.
Yeah.
They reach the same point by different means.
Yeah. Anyway, can you bring that full circle real quick as far as, because we're kind of wrapping up. But
are we wrapping up?
Yeah.
Should we wrap up? This was one topic. I have a whole list. I thought you had a list too.
I do, but
what time is it?
It's already been 2 hours.
Well, it's been 2 hours, but what's the time?
Well,
What's the time? It's only friggin' 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
You just want to take a break and then we'll come right back?
I'm just saying, how are we going to break these up? That's all
we can break this one up. Since we're conscious of it, the first one happened because we kept on going. We could just create an ad break and go, here, watch this.
Crumbly crunchies are the best. Look so great upon your
You're going to get copy struck for that?
Maybe. Serve them to one.
Well, so we could pause and then just start again, unless you're suggesting we stop.
No,
because I would suggest don't go.
Have to stop.
Well, I might have to pee, so let's do that. So pause.